Hi, my name is Kayleen and I'm the Pilates mechanic here in the BB Garage. Today I'm going to show you how to put on your connector for studio reformers. Now this applies for two types of studio reformers. Both of them have wood risers and there are two different types of shoulder rests. So we've got twist locks here, but I'll also have a section on how to put the carriage assembly on with metal posts on your shoulder rests. So in this video, we're going to start by putting the carriage hardware on, then we'll put the risers on, then we'll thread the ropes and put the loops on, and then I'll go over a few tips to help get you started smoothly. Okay? So let's first start by taking the ropes and the shoulder rests off of the carriage. With our twist lock shoulder rests, we'll just turn a quarter turn, slide, and they should come right off. So before we flip the carriage over to work underneath it, we need to swap out a bolt on your shoulder rest brackets here. So I'm looking at this bolt here, and in your package, so we've got a small box here, we're going to pull out some of these bags. Now, in one of these bags, you should find another little bag of hardware, and we want the hardware in here. Okay. So I'm looking for 1.5 inch long flathead screws. Okay, so they look like that. And then I'll use the Allen wrench that's in here to loosen this bolt and take it all the way out. Okay, we can toss this, so I'll put it off to the side and then put in our new bolt. It should be snug, but doesn't have to be super, super tight. Okay? And I'll do the same thing for the other side. Okay. Now we've got our two bolts replaced. We can unspring the carriage and flip it over and lay it across the frame. When you place the carriage on the frame, just be sure that the vinyl hits both sides of the frame so that we're not scraping it up by hitting all this hardware that's on the headrest side of the carriage. Okay, so now we're ready to put our hair guard and the pulley assembly underneath the carriage. The first step in assembling our hardware underneath the carriage is to install the hair guard. So in our box, we're going to find 3 parts. Okay, so we should have 2 pieces that look like that. Let me find the other one. And a plastic piece that fits across the 2 that looks like this. Okay. And so we're actually going to screw this hair guard on using 4 screws. So in that little bag of hardware we had earlier, we're going to find the 4 tiny screws. These are the smallest screws in your package, and they look like that. Okay. Where's the other one? Here it is. Now, I'm going to fully tighten the screws on the side that have a hole. And when you start these screws, be gentle. We don't need to force it. Sometimes they're a little bit tricky to find the threads. So just have some patience here. And you should be able to start them all with your hands. Okay. Now on this side with the holes, I'm going to take my Allen wrench, once again from the bag, and I'm going to fully tighten these bolts. Okay. Now the side that has the slots, we will finger tighten them, and then later we'll come back and tighten them once the width has been properly adjusted. Okay, so I'm going to put them in by hand. So you can see here that they still slide back and forth. Okay. All right, so now we've got our hair guard assembled to the brackets. We're going to install the brackets to the carriage base. So we want to make sure that the pulleys are facing the correct orientation, and that is towards the risers. And it can get kind of confusing when the carriage is upside down and sideways. But so we're going to take our frame of reference to just the carriage. And I want the pulleys to face the spreader bar or the headrest. Okay, so I'm going to flip this around. And then I'm going to slide it over the bolts here. So you should be able to see that the bolt we just installed before flipping the carriage over sticks up through the bracket. Okay, and that should happen on both sides. Okay, now from here, we're going to go back to our hardware and find a washer and a nylock nut. Okay, so I will show you what those two look like. Here's our washer and our nylock nut. We need one for each side. Here's the other side. Okay. So to secure the bracket, we're going to put the washer on, the bolt that's sticking up, and then the nut. And for this one, it's really helpful to have a socket with a 7/16 socket with a ratchet handle. Okay. So I'm going to tighten that down. Now I'm not going to tighten it all the way down yet because we have another bolt to assemble here. Okay, so I actually just tightened it a little bit too much. Okay, and I'll do the same thing to the other side. Okay. Then the last piece of hardware that we need to secure the brackets for are included in here. So we can put our Allen wrench aside. We're going to need 2 big washers and 2 regular hex nuts and these 2 bolts. So here's the hardware we need pictured right here. Okay. We're going to take these and make a little assembly. So first you slide the washer on, and then we're going to slide the hex nut all the way on so it holds the washer in place. Okay, just like that. So now we've made that little assembly. Okay, I'll do the same thing for the other side.
Do the one on your right first.
Okay. So these are actually going to go through the top side of the carriage and stick out just like our other bolts that we've already put nuts on. So now we can take the final 2 nylock nuts and washers. Okay, this assembly we just made is going to go through the rope hole. The rope hole is that hole that we sometimes stick the rope through after it goes through the eye straps and the cam cleats. So I'm going to take this bolt and put it in from the top side. Now this would be the top side if the carriage was right side up in the frame, but in this case the carriage is upside down. So I'm going to stick it through, and now we can see that the bolt sticks through not only the frame but also the bracket. Okay, now from here I'm going to take my other washer, slide the washer over, and then take my nylock nut, and I'm going to tighten. Well, I'll start the nut with my fingers. Okay, so now at this point I'm going to need two tools to tighten this all the way. I need the Allen wrench that came with the kit, and that is going to fit on the head of the bolt that is underneath, and that's going to hold everything in place. Then I'm going to take my socket, okay, and that's what I'll use to tighten this bolt. Okay. So I'm having a hard time here because I've used the long end of the Allen wrench. I'm just going to quickly switch so that I have more leverage by using the short end of the Allen wrench. All right, that should be better. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down most of the way. And then when I get close, let me get a little closer. When I get close, I'm going to make sure that this bracket is pressed flush up against this wooden piece here so that it's not sitting back like this. Okay? I'm going to press it all the way up there and tighten the bolt to make sure it stays in that position. Okay, here we go. Sometimes it's nice to have a second person here. Sometimes that helps. What's going on? Oh, my other side got a little jammed up here. 1 second. There we go. So the other side has to be flush as well. There we go. Okay, here we go. Let's try that again. And it's still flush up against that wood piece. Now it's tight. So now I can go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to take that bolt assembly, put it through the other rope hole so it sticks through the carriage and through the bracket. And I'll take, again, the washer and the nylock nut, start the nylock nut, take the short end of the Allen wrench and find the head of the bolt and your socket wrench. Okay, and we're going to tighten this down almost all the way and then make this bracket flush. Okay, we're going to press it all the way up against the wooden beam. Okay. There we go. And that is how we're going to tighten this down. Okay. Might be nice for two people to do here. So maybe I can get someone to help me hold the bracket flush up against the beam. Thank you. And here I can tighten. Two people, super handy. Oh crap, I lost the head of the bolt again. There we go. All right, so I've tightened that down. It's all there. So we've secured both brackets, but we have some other bolts to tighten. So I'm going to tighten the other nylock nuts that are sticking up, and I don't need my Allen wrench for this. I just need my 7/16 socket. I'm going to give that a little tighten. Okay, do the same thing on the other side. Okay, it doesn't have to be super tight, but you do want to make sure that the nylock O-ring is engaging the threads of the bolt here. Okay, so you can see we've already tightened these two bolts that hold the hair guard to the bracket because those were on the holes. So on the other side, we need to finish tightening down these bolts. And you can tell these ones are they're not all the way flush with the plastic, but they're also in the side that has the slots. Okay, and the reason we don't tighten these down is that this way the width of the brackets can be a little bit flexible as we install it. But now that they're installed, we're going to go ahead and tighten down the bolts that hold the hair guard to the bracket. Okay, so now our undercarriage hardware is all installed and we're ready to flip the carriage back over and put it back in the frame. Now we're ready to put the carriage back in the frame. So this may be helpful to have a second person, but we're going to flip it. And it should slide right in. I'm going to attach one spring so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, so now we need to change out our shoulder rests. So there's only one thing on the shoulder rest we need to change here. And you can see these are the ones that I took off earlier. We're actually going to swap out this black twist lock post. So to do that, we're going to loosen these until they come off, okay? These can get set aside. And then we've got new posts that have a little hat on them, okay? And we will tighten these or twist them back on here. And I don't want you to twist them all the way down, just get them started here. Okay. There we go. And then we can replace the shoulder rests back on the carriage. And now we'll tighten the knobs down so the shoulder rests don't rattle anymore. All right. Now, if your studio reformer has metal posts on your shoulder rests and wood risers, I'm going to show you how to change out your shoulder posts and install the hardware on the bottom of the carriage because it's slightly different than carriages with the twist lock shoulder rests. So first, we'll take the ropes and the loops off of the carriage. And then you're going to need a pair of vice grips and a rag. A pipe wrench might work as well, but it's really helpful if you've used a pair of vice grips before because sometimes these metal posts are really stuck on there. So I've got my vice grips over here, and I'll bring my parts over. So the reason that I'm going to use a rag is to protect the surface finish of the posts from the teeth of the vice grips. Now, the posts just screw on, so I should be able to use lefty-loosey, righty-tighty to get them off, okay? So that's not tight enough. There we go. And once I've started it, I should be able to use my hands to get it the rest of the way off. Okay, so I'm just going to wipe this off. We can put the metal post away in case you ever need it again, but you shouldn't. And then in your bag of parts, there should be a package with 2 new shoulder rest posts. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of these. Now the new posts have a little hat on them, and that is so that the straps don't slide off when you're using them and they're around the posts. So we'll just twist on the new shoulder post. And I'll give it a good cinch with my hand, but we don't need to use the vice grips to secure it. So now I will repeat that same process on the other shoulder post. Okay, now that we have our shoulder posts on, I'm ready to flip the carriage over and install the hardware underneath the carriage. To do this, you might want 2 people. Sometimes you can manage with just 1. We just want to be sure not to bang any hard edges on our wood frame. Now we're ready to put the hardware on the carriage. So in your box, you'll need to find 3 pieces to start, 2 brackets that have pulleys attached, and a plastic hair guard. And we're going to assemble the hair guard to the brackets here. Now you've also got a bag of hardware. I'm going to pull out some very specific hardware to do this job. What I'm looking for are the 4 shortest bolts, okay? And they look like this. I'm going to hand start each of these bolts in the holes. Now, for this step, take a lot of patience. Sometimes the threads don't catch right away, and be gentle. There's no need to force the bolts into the bracket. Okay. Now I'm going to take the Allen wrench that's in that hardware bag and tighten the bolts that are on the side with the circular holes. Notice that there are slots on one side. We're going to tighten the bolts but leave them loose on that side. But the bolts that are on the side with the round holes, the circular holes, we're going to tighten all the way and secure the hair guard to the bracket on this side. This does not need to be over tightened, but I will use the long side of the Allen wrench just to make sure they're secure. Okay. And again, I'm tightening these bolts on this side, but they're not going all the way tight. Okay. So on this side with the slots, we can still move side to side. Okay, so notice the orientation of the hair guard. This is this way for a reason, because we're actually going to flip this assembly around so that the pulleys are facing the correct way. So I'm going to take this, flip it around, the pulleys face the headrest, and then the bracket should fit over some holes and a couple of very short protruding bolts on the underside of the carriage. Okay. Now, next I'm going to build an assembly of a bolt, a washer, and a nut. So I'm going to look in my little hardware bag and pull out 3 things: a regular hex nut, a flat washer, and a bolt. And I'm going to find the other set of 3 of those. So notice that this is the hex nut that does not have the nylon in it. Okay. Now I'm going to take these and make a little assembly here. So a washer, and then I'll thread the hex nut all the way on to keep the washer in place. Okay. Each of these assemblies is going to go through the hole on the carriage where the rope normally goes through. So you'll be able to see if I put it through the hole in the carriage, the threads will stick up through the bracket, just like that. Okay. Now I'm going to have to hold it here with one hand so that I can get a washer and a nylock nut over the protruding end of this bolt so that we can secure the bracket to the carriage. So one washer, and then I start the nylock nut with my fingers until I will need a socket wrench, so I can't go much further. Okay, so now I need a socket wrench and my Allen wrench. And the Allen wrench is going to go on the head of the bolt underneath to keep the bolt from spinning as I tighten the nut. So I've got one hand underneath there, and then I'm going to tighten the nylock bolt. Let's get that out of the way. I'm going to tighten almost all the way tight. I still want a little bit of wiggle room until I secure the second bolt on this bracket. Okay, so it's pretty close there, but I've still got a little bit of wiggle room. Okay, I will do the same thing on the other side in a moment. Now we need this assembly. So this is a black knob and a black bolt. And these parts, this bolt is going to go through the spot where your quick release pin is. So here is a quick release pin. Okay, on the other side, you normally put it through so that the shoulder rest does not move. We're going to put this bolt through there instead. Now, some of you may have this kit already installed because this is called a shoulder rest lockdown kit. Okay, so it's the same pieces. I'm going to use my finger on the head of the bolt and tighten the knob. Now, when you tighten this, it's important to get the edge of the bracket flush up against this piece of wood on the carriage, so it's not crooked. Okay, and then I can go back and tighten the bolt we just installed so that this bracket will not move. Okay, we've got a secure bracket. That side is all done. Now we can repeat on the other side. Now I'm going to slide the bolt assembly that we made through the rope hole into the bracket. So now the threads protrude here. And I'll take the other washer and nylock nut and slide it on. Okay. Again, I'm going to take my Allen wrench and socket the Allen wrench to secure the head of the bolt that I currently can't see, and use the socket to tighten the nut. And I'm going to go almost all the way tight. Okay. Now we're going to find our lockdown kit components, the bolt and the knob, and we'll remove the quick release pin and slide the bolt in through this hole, and it should protrude through the bracket here. Now, before I totally tighten this side of the bracket, I'm going to make sure that the front edge of this bracket is flush up against the wood header, okay? And then I'll go ahead and tighten this down. I'm just holding the head of the bolt with my finger for this knob. Then I can go back using my Allen wrench and my socket to tighten the first bolt assembly, the one we left loose. And I'm going to tighten this all the way. It should be snug, but not wrenched on too hard. All right. We've got a secure bracket over here. Final thing on this side, notice that I've left the side of the hair guard with slots for last. So now the width is adjusted. I'm going to tighten down these two Allen heads here. Okay. And we'll snug these down, but not over tight. Okay. All right. Now our carriage hardware is all installed and we're ready to flip the carriage back over and work on the risers. Okay, to flip the carriage back over, you can use 2 people or 1. We just want to be careful not to ding the frame with any of the hard edges. Okay. All right, so before we get to the risers, I just want to mention 2 things here. First, we've got our quick release pins dangling around here. We can take those off really easily. You just need a Phillips screwdriver. You'll see that there's a screw where the lanyard is anchored. I'm going to put the screwdriver right in that screw, unscrew it all the way out. And then we can take the lanyard off and then put the screw back where we found it. Okay? And you would do the same thing for the other side. There we go. Now, the second thing to note here is that with this particular kit, you will receive a couple of extra pieces of hardware. Okay? So you'll have 2 extra bolts and spacers. Now, these are extra in case during your replacement of the posts something breaks. If that happens for some reason, please give Balance Body tech support a call and they'll walk you through how to replace the bolts and the posts. All right, now let's move on to the risers. All right. So carriage is all set. We're going to transition over to the risers. We're going to take off your existing ropes, put them off to the side. We don't need them. And then we'll take off our pulley assembly. So from each of these pulleys, we're going to loosen the knob on the back. And notice I'm holding on to the eye bolt here so that it doesn't twist. Okay, and we're going to need these assemblies again. Whoops. So don't toss them, just put them off to the side. I'm going to place them right here inside the frame within easy reach. Okay. And now I'm ready to take off the risers. So I'm going to go find my riser box. It's the big one. And we'll take out our risers. One of them just fell out of the package. So this is what your new risers will look like. We're going to replace our old ones with these new ones. Inside this package, you can see they're all wrapped up. There's a little package of bolts and washers. We're going to try and open this because inside there's also an Allen wrench that we will use to remove the old risers and put the new ones on. Here's our Allen wrench. And I'm going to lefty-loosey to loosen these 4 bolts on the back here. Now, we don't want these bolts to get mixed up. They won't work for our new risers, so we're going to have to put our risers and bolts off to the side. Okay. Don't lose this Allen wrench. We need it for our new risers. So in our bag of hardware, I'm going to take out 2 new bolts and 2 washers. And I will slide the washers onto the bolts so that each bolt has a washer on it. Okay. We're going to use these to attach your new riser. Okay. So I'm going to hold this up, stick the bolt through, and now this bolt should line up with our existing holes in the frame. And I'll just start it by hand and then find the other one, get it in there, start it by hand. Okay, once they're both started, then we can grab the Allen wrench to finish it up. Now these should be tight, but not so tight that you break a sweat tightening them up. Okay, so snug. I'm going to go back and use the short end, just cinch them down just a little bit. There we go. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Notice that now that the risers are on, we should have 2 holes showing, 1 on each riser. So this hole here should be above the frame, and this hole here should be above the frame. Okay, so these holes are where we're going to install your existing pulley assemblies. So I'm going to grab those, okay, and we're going to put them on so that there's 1 washer here on the front, okay, and it's going to slide right into the hole here. And you'll have to sort of use your fingers to press the head or the loop of the eye bolt through so that we have enough threads protruding in the back to slide on the washer and your knob, okay? And we'll tighten those down. You don't want to over tighten these knobs because it is possible to strip the threads, but they should be snug, okay? And we'll do the same thing on the other side. One washer and the knob go on the back. Sometimes you need a little patience. There we go. Okay. All right, so our riser assembly is all done. Now we're ready to install the ropes. Okay, so I'm going to grab my package with the rope. It's way over here. And I don't know if I probably just said plural, but there's only one rope for the connector, which is part of the magic of this piece of equipment. So I'm going to unwind this thing so that I know where at least one end is. But now I've got it all tangled up, okay? I promise I have done this before. So we've got our rope. You're going to find one end. We're going to start by threading this through the carriage pulleys. So underneath the carriage, we've got 2 pulleys. You'll start on one side, doesn't matter which side, and thread the rope through one pulley, go right across to the other side, thread it through the other pulley, so that now we've got 2 ends of the rope coming out from under the carriage. Okay? So I'm just going to focus on one end of the rope first. And actually, before I go much further, I'm going to grab the loops because those will be important as we thread the rope. Okay? So our connector comes with 2 sets of loops, one gray and one black. I want you to pull the black ones out first. Now those are the ones that have the pulleys attached to them. Okay, so now we've got our ropes threaded through the carriage pulleys. We're going to slide our black loops over the shoulder rests so that we've got the pulleys here ready to be threaded onto the ropes. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my rope threading here. I've got one end of the rope, and I'm going to take it first to the lower pulley on the riser, and then I'm going to take it up to the top pulley that's on the inside, okay? So that now we've got a rope that goes up from the bottom. This rope is now going to go back to the carriage, but instead of going under the carriage, it's going to go on the black loop pulley, okay? And then from here, we go back to the riser, this time only to the outside top pulley. And then we go back to the frame. And I'm just going to loop this around the post for now while I do the other side, okay? So my other side's a little tangled. I'm going to go ahead and untangle it just enough so we see that this is the other side, whoops, coming out from under the carriage. Okay, so these are still attached. We start with the lowest pulley. We go up to the top inside pulley, back to the pulley that's attached to the black loop, back to the top outside pulley, and then towards the frame, or sorry, towards the carriage. Okay, so you'll see that to really get all the way there, the carriage might have to move. So this is where we attach our gray loops. Okay, the gray loops are going to go on the very end here. I'm going to separate them. And this is the same thing that we do on our soft touch connections here. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting this end through the metal D-ring. Okay, so this is attached here. Then I take the soft end of the loop and put it through the loop of the rope. And I'm going to pull it all the way down here. And that should be nice and tight there. I can then put the gray loop wherever I want there. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, taking the loose end of the rope, putting it through the metal D-ring, sliding the rope over the soft end of the loop, and pulling it all the way down the length of the loop. And then It tightens here, okay? So now our connector is actually all assembled, but it's not quite ready to use. So in the next segment, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use and to set up your connector, just so that you have the first few really important tips to get you going, okay? Before you get started using your connector, I want to review a few safety precautions and tips for use. Let's talk about your loops first. So your loops may have this Velcro piece that goes around them, and that is to make the loops a little bit smaller to fit small feet so that they don't slide off. One of the really great features about these loops is that they have they're called tri-loops because they have another piece that folds out so that now you have basically a Y loop built in. And so you can put this behind the heel so that you can do plantar flexion and dorsiflexion throughout the whole range of motion. You can also use this for hands to give a little bit of extra wrist support. To put these away, you simply flip them back down over the black loop, okay? So all 4 loops should have this feature. Now you'll notice that this extra tri-loop piece is gray, and that's to denote the difference between the 2 straps. You'll notice that your gray loops only have 1 rope, no pulleys, okay? And your black loops have 2 ropes going to them with pulleys, okay? So if you are using the connector with only 1 set of straps, be sure to put the gray loops on the shoulder posts, okay? This way the weight that you're moving is about the same as when you're just on a regular reformer. The gray loops, if you were to switch these, the gray loops would be much lighter, so it gives you a different feel. Okay? No matter what, if you're only using 1 set of loops, be sure that the other set is around the post with the little hat on it, because that is so that the loops don't slide up and off while they're under tension. Okay? So we know that the black loops give you the most normal weight, but they also give you the independent motion. If you really wanted to dial it back and go so that you don't have this independent motion, we would switch the loops. So I'm going to take the gray loops off, put the black loops on the posts, and you can hold the gray loops here. Now we're going to take the rope that's coming out from underneath the carriage. It's just going to come up, and you're going to loop it around the cam cleat. Okay? So now if you pull on this rope here, it's stuck in the cam cleat. Okay? So now we can move the carriage with just 1 strap, and the other strap doesn't respond. So you can do that on both sides, taking the rope from under the carriage, looping it through the cam cleats, making sure that when you tug it, it doesn't move. Okay? So now we've got 2 totally dependent straps. Okay? So very unconnector, but it's there if you need that. So I'm just going to slide the ropes out of the cam cleats, and we'll place them back on the posts. So that concludes our connector assembly video. I hope you really enjoy your connector experience. If you need more videos like this one, you can check them out at pilates.com/bbgarage. I'll see you there.